Okay, so mute groups. I'm going to click up here, and we have a very similar display like the view groups, only this is mute groups. I want to mention the word group. It should not be confused with the term that is usually used to describe a subgroup. A subgroup is a very common thing found on many mixing consoles. It is used to group things together, such as all your drum mics, or all your praise team singers, or all brass instruments. It's up to you to use them however you wish. But the term group here in these discussions does not refer to subgroup rather than the name implied before it, such as view groups or mute groups. So, you can see here I have 6 mute groups. The first one is all. The second one is break. Third and fourth one are not used. The fifth one mutes reverb 1. And the sixth one mutes reverb 2. Let's go over how I use the first mute. And that's all. When I tap that, it mutes all the channels. Let's go back here and unmute all these channels. We don't have to do them all. We'll just do what we can see. When I have the all mute button set, all the channels are muted. If I unmute the all, it unmutes all the channels that are assigned or included in that mute group. You'll notice the color of the mute buttons. They're a dark red. That indicates that the channels are muted from a mute master. If we unmute all of those and we mute them individually, you can see that the color is bright red. If I go to mute all, it will still mute all the other channels. So let's look at the second mute master. It's called break, B-R-K. When I tap that, naturally, it is going to mute all the channels that have been assigned to that break mute master, except for Tiffany's vocal mic and the iPad channel for break music. In order to assign channels to these, let's look at all mute. We can click the assign button, just like we did in the view groups. We're now looking at the mute 1 button, which is the mute group called all. I named it all. You can see all the inputs are muted. Self-explanatory. Now, if you want to look at the break mute master settings, you don't have to go back out of here and come back in. You can just hit mute 2, and you'll see it says break, and you will see that all the channels are muted except Tiffany's and the iPad. Here's another thing I do. I use mute 5 to mute the first reverb, called reverb 1. I use mute 6 to mute reverb 2. You'll notice I used lowercase letters to name the first reverb and uppercase letters to name the second reverb. The first reverb I have set a certain way. Click Advanced, you can see all these settings. That's how I have the reverb set for typical contemporary music. A decent sounding reverb, a nice sounding reverb, not real long. Let's go back here. The second reverb is much larger, much longer decay time, and that I use for ballads, where you want a great, big, huge, long reverb. I would typically have, let me unmute these because that's where we would be. Typically, I would be using the first reverb. And you can see the return, or the output of the reverb, is right here. And it's on. So that's what I use the mute masters for. All mutes all the channels. Notice how this wants to keep turning off quickly. I could select multi-select. Then I'm able to choose more than one, and it won't disappear on me. Below this is simply a way to look at all of your masters. Let's tap on that once. There it is. Those are all your monitor masters. Of course, there are more. If you swipe, go to the next tab, which is Effects, and you get to see all your effects masters. Sub, of course, you get to see all 6 subgroup masters. Of course, you click on VCA, and you get to see all 6 VCAs. And naturally, you click on Matrix, and you get to see the 6 Matrix masters. I did not discuss the Matrix masters. What these are is 6 individual mono outputs. Instead of taking inputs like a normal mixer would, a matrix mixer receives the outputs of the mixer and can combine them together for a single mix. A common use would be using the left and right master and putting that into a matrix and use that matrix to feed an amplifier for peripheral speakers like the foyer speakers and bathroom speakers. This would give you separate control for volume, and in fact, you could use a serious amount of compression so that when people are in the foyer, they aren't blown away with the dynamic range that is more common in the sanctuary or in the concert hall, whatever your use. Obviously, there is equalization as well. Any combination can be achieved with the matrix. And of course, they are linkable for stereo use. Now let's move on to VCAs.